this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Plaquemines Parish Council Audit Committee to order at 9 a.m. here for October the 22nd, 2020 in the Belle Chase Council Building Chambers. Ask the Secretary to open the machine for roll call. Let the record reflect that all members are present. Mr. Duke is here representing the department. Mr. Epley and directors are here representing their individual departments. Ask Mr. Schultz to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me correct that Ms. Taylor's here. Mr. Russell Scott is not here. So we have two directors here. And we have a Community Action Agency representative here as well. We'll move on to item number 2.
Review and discussion of the COSA Risk Assessment Framework.
Yeah, what I'd like to do this morning is take a look at a framework that is used throughout the United States for state and local governments. This is a framework for control. It's called COSO, and I'll go into the definition of COSO. But COSO has 5 components of internal control. There are questions associated with this process that are too important to ignore. Okay, COSO was developed by the Committee of the Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadaway Commission. It's a private sector, it was a private sector initiative established in 1985 by 5 financial professional associations. The associations were the Institute of Internal Auditors, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, American Accounting Association, Institute of Management Accountants, and the Financial Executives Institute. Why? COSO's goal is to improve the quality of financial reporting through a focus on corporate governance, ethical practices, and internal control. Internal control is a process that's affected by the entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel, designed to provide reasonable assurance, not absolute, regarding the achievement of the objectives. Control is the effectiveness and efficiency of operations, reliability of financial reporting, and compliance with applicable laws and regulations. The control has 5 components. Control environment, that's basically everything to do with the parish. Risk assessment, control activities, policies and procedures, information and communication, how this information is communicated back and forth between people that work here, and the monitoring process. How are we monitoring our controls? Ethics. Do board members and senior executives set a day in and day out example of high integrity and ethical behavior? Is there a written code of conduct in place? Are performance and incentive compensation targets reasonable and realistic, or do they create undue pressure on achievement of short-term results? Is it clear that fraud will not be tolerated?
Mr. Duke, would you pull that mic a little closer to you?
Yes. Is it clear that fraud will not be tolerated under no circumstances? Are ethics woven into the criteria that are used to evaluate individual and business unit performance? Does management react appropriately when receiving bad news from subordinates and business units? Does the process exist to resolve close ethical calls? Are business risks identified and candidly discussed with the board and directors? Risk. What is risk, and how is this handled throughout the parish? Risk is the relevant and reliable internal and external information that's identified, compiled, and communicated in a timely manner to those who are in a position to act before something bad happens. Are risks identified and analyzed and actions taken to mitigate them promptly? Are controls in place to assure that management decisions are properly carried out? Internal control. Do senior and line management executives demonstrate that they accept control responsibility, not just delegate it to the financial and audit staff? Does management routinely monitor controls and process of running the organization? Does management clearly assign responsibilities for training and monitoring these controls? Are periodic systematic evaluations of control systems throughout the year conducted and documented? Are such evaluations conducted by personnel with appropriate responsibilities, business experience, and knowledge of this parish's affairs? Are appropriate criteria established to evaluate these controls? Are control deficiencies reported to higher levels of management and corrected on a timely basis? Are appropriate controls built in as new systems are designed and brought in on stream, online? The audit committees. Has the board recently reviewed the adequacy of the audit committee's written charter? Are audit committee members functioning and in fact independent of management? Do audit committee members possess the appropriate mix of operating and financial control expertise? Does the audit committee understand and monitor the broad organizational control environment? How does the parish feel about controls? And does the audit committee oversee the appropriateness and relevance and reliability of operational and financial reporting to the board as well as investors and external users? Does the audit committee oversee existence and compliance with ethical standards? Very important. Does the committee or full board have meaningful but challenging relationship with independent auditors, internal auditors, and senior control executives and key corporate business folks? Does internal auditing have the support of top management, the audit committee, and the board of directors as a whole? Has the written scope of the audit function responsibilities been reviewed by the audit committee for adequacy? Is the organizational relationship between the internal auditing and senior executives appropriate? Does internal auditing have and use open lines of communication and private access to all senior officers and audit committee? Are the audit reports covering the right subjects distributed to the right people and acted upon in a timely manner? Do key audit executives possess an appropriate level of expertise? Now, all of this, I guess, I wanted to go over. This can be found at the Institute of Internal Auditing website, www.theia.org, if y'all want to take a look at it. But what I'd like to propose is that, the parish use this framework throughout the parish as it's being used throughout the state and throughout other local governments. I think this is something that we all can strive to put in place and make the parish, work better, be able to achieve their objectives in a more efficient manner, and especially be able to ward off any high-level risks that might occur without being mitigated. And one other thing, too, is that in risk, the risk assessment that I do every year is a pretty thorough risk assessment. However, normally the way it works is that all departments of the parish should be looking at risk, as we stated here, monitoring the risk throughout the year, and creating their own risk assessment. So at the end of the day or at the end of the year, when I do mine, I contact the directors and they email me what they've been doing for the entire year, and I'm able to take a look at what they have seen and what they've been monitoring for that entire year. And that gives me a lot better idea about what we need to focus our audit time on. So I hope that wasn't too boring, and that concludes that part of it. We can.
To implement this, which direction do you see us going to be able to implement this? As you read through that,
We're already doing a lot of it. A lot of this is already in place. But I think we need to adopt this framework formally, and so that everybody knows and everybody has a copy of it. And you can go online at the Institute and get a copy of it if you don't have a copy of it. And just mentally, the whole parish, if they try to follow this, which a lot of it, like I say, is being followed, but you just, dig into it and make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's, we're going to find at the end of the day that we achieve what we want to achieve, we mitigate risk, and, the processes get better and better as time goes on.
Do we offer it here or at the council meeting, or?
I think it would be good to adopt it into a resolution or an ordinance, preferably an ordinance would be the best way to go. And hopefully we'll have all the directors, everybody on board, that this is what we're going to try to use. This is how we're going to deal with risk, especially. This is how we're going to deal with internal controls, monitoring. All of this stuff, fits together, to make the parish better, make the parish a better place, and you're achieving the parish is achieving their objectives, by using a framework, a systematic approach to monitoring, risk assessment, and so on.
Mr. Duke, I think that's an important issue, especially in the critical time that this parish is in. I mean, at one time, when you look at this, it was like, these things were overlooked because of the fact we didn't have a lot of financial issues. But I think these are critical times for the parish where policies do need to go into place so that we can follow these guidelines to try to bounce back from the critical issues that we're having in this parish. So I really thank you for bringing this up.
any other comments on this? So I would suggest that maybe we get the council secretary to draft some legislation for introduction, if we want to move in this direction, and if the audit committee sees fit, then it'd be appropriate to have a motion from the audit committee seeking the approval of the council format for the government, and ask the council to adopt the audit committee's recommendation.
I'll make a motion to go with it.
I'll second.
And any further comments or discussion on it? Hearing none, the machine is open. And the resolution is adopted, and the secretary is clear as to what we're going to be asking. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Duke. We'll move to item 2B.
Review and discussion of the Recreation Department internal audit.
Okay, I'm going to review with the committee this morning my work that I did on the internal audit of Plaquemines Parish Recreation Department, project number 2020-03, and if we can scroll down to my conclusion, I'll start off with that. My conclusion was the concession facility agreement between Plaquemines Parish government and Lanyap Sports Event Management LLC should have had more oversight by the parish council and legal department.
Excuse me, Mr. Duke, can you please pull the microphone closer?
My internal audit conclusion in reference to my work that I did on the recreation audit is stated as follows. The concession facility agreement between Plaquemines Parish government and the Lanyap Sports and Event Management LLC should have had more oversight by the parish council and the legal department. And I think what I'm saying here is that I believe, and I've always believed since I've been doing this, is that the parish council should be overseeing all contracts, not just the big contracts, but the little contracts. And I know this is probably a lot more work for the council, but I think it would mitigate this type of risk. So basically, when I reviewed this concession agreement, I didn't find some approvals, and we'll go into that as.
Before you go any further on this subject, we've brought this up several times. There is a resolution on the books. Actually, I believe it might be an ordinance. I have to go back and check. It's been so long. That professional services, when they are sought, they are supposed to inform the council. They're supposed to provide us with the RFP, RFQ for professional services for review of the council. That's not being done, and no matter what we say, it doesn't look like it's going to be done. So we really don't have any input into any of this, even though the policy of the government states that it should be done.
Right.
And so you've written it in other audit reports.
I have.
And the administration just fails to follow that ordinance.
Okay.
And so I think that, if this government wants to function and work together, that is the legislative oversight part of this process. And the executive department or the administration goes in a direction, and we find out about it after the fact, which creates bad will and skepticism about what is being done. So, I believe that if they would be included, council members, up front, and if you have questions about what's being sought after, then you can have input in the beginning. But that runs rampant throughout the way that the government is operating. And, to give you a perfect example, I have a drainage project. I've sent emails out. I've got work requests that have been on the books for years. I'm asking the administration, particularly the engineering department, to be involved to review what they are currently designing so that I can have input, since we appropriate the funds. And it seems to be that once we appropriate the funds, it's over until the funds are spent. And we are not included in the process of developing the project for the funds to be spent. And the Barrier Road Drainage Project is a prime example. I sent an email asking to be included because I have work requests sitting on the books for years that I don't know if they're being designed into the project or not. Now, the same thing with the ferry ramps. We had to call a meeting, and we finally got plugged into the ferry ramp project, which, as a result of that, we've moved the location. And I assume that after that meeting that effort is moving forward with a new location. But those are the type of things that if the government, working as a whole, with some council input, would make the government move a lot smoother, a lot more trustworthy, and a lot more confident that we are all accomplishing the goals that we're all on the same page about. And that these issues can be worked out prior to us getting to the end of the project and having a discussion that's not very healthy.
Yeah, and I ditto everything you said. You said it very eloquently, Mr. Rizal. We have to work together, and the parish will do a lot better if you don't have a situation where what you said exists. And because the appearance of that causes everybody to think that there's something wrong, something is going on. And in fact, nothing really is wrong going on. It's just that the oversight function is not working properly. The council is the oversight function for the entire parish. And this is something I don't have to keep saying to you because you already know it, but the council and the parish have got to change the culture. They have to work together. I was told by a gentleman I first started in this business. He was a very old gentleman. He said, "Randy, you're going to find out that the culture in places is very difficult to change. And a lot of times you'll find yourself going out the door before the culture will change. But if at all possible, we need to change that, and we all need to work together." So I ditto everything you've just said, Mr. Russell. That's the way it should work.
Barbara, Mr. Russo has repeatedly mentioned that ordinance. Is there any way you can find that ordinance and forward that to us about professional services? That way I
For the contract, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll get that.
understand, read the whole legislation and understand what he's talking about. Thank you.
But you're going to go over this contract with the concession stand?
Yes, we're going to go through my observations on that. Yes, sir.
Okay, you can proceed.
Observation number 1, Policies and Procedures Manual. The internal auditor recommends that a recreation
Mr.
policy
Duke, would you
and
pull that
procedure-
mic closer to you? I know.
Recreation, the internal audit,
Pull the mic closer to you. That way,
Yeah.
when you
Oh,
come back, you'll be able to be heard.
okay, observation number 1, Policies and Procedures Manual for Recreation. The internal auditor recommends that a recreation policy and procedure manual be put in place.
And I think that was sent, huh?
Yes, a management response. I will have a recreation department research manuals of other jurisdictions and have one adopted. The Director of Public Service sent to me by email yesterday a policy, a really good, thorough, detailed policy and procedure manual that has been prepared.
And so if that's the case, then perhaps we should adopt that policy if.
Yes,
review.
sir.
And it should probably.
Yes, and that's another thing too, Mr. Russell. I guess everything that, this audit committee, I guess, needs to get with, the full council, and every recommendation that I recommend, if you all agree with it, and you think that the parish can do it at a low cost and a beneficial manner, a resolution or ordinance should be passed on every one of my recommendations.
Yeah, I agree.
So
That would probably help.
I'm sorry, the policy that was sent over to us, that's not a new policy. Is it something that the parish has had for a while? Do you know, Todd? It's new. Okay.
Yeah, it looked like it was new. It was,
So it's best for us to
Yeah.
adopt that policy.
yeah.
So I would ask that we review that policy that is being recommended by the internal auditor and provided by the administration, and at the next meeting, have an item on the agenda to discuss it, and perhaps make a recommendation from the audit committee to the full council to adopt some policy, whether it's that policy, some changed policy or whatever, so that way we can comply with the recommendation.
Yes, sir.
So if we would take that under consideration for the next meeting and thoroughly look through it and see if we agree with it. Okay, you want to move on?
Observation number 2, Recreation Concession Stand Agreement. My recommendation, in my opinion, all contracts should be reviewed by the parish council. Ensure that the legal department stamps or signs off on every PPG contract. Ensure there is a right to audit clause in all contracts. Ensure compliance with Section 7.02, administration of operating and capital budgets of the parish charter. Management response: I will consult with legal and make sure the concession contract follows the parish charter. Observation number 3.
Before we move off of that, it said in here that that all concession stands at all parish recreation locations during baseball, football game days and nights were going to be under this contract. Did they indeed operate all concession stands throughout the parish?
not down the road.
No, I don't think, I'm not sure about that.
We've had that discussion.
I might have that in my records, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Deputy will address it.
Contract is only for recreation north. It did not address the southern end of the recreation concessions. There was a resolution passed in 2018 by the council authorizing President Amos Cormier III or his designee to seek proposals, bids, or quotes to manage and operate Plaquemines Parish Recreation North concession stands and any other concession stands as needed throughout the parish if warranted. So we followed the resolution that was passed in 2018. We did an RFP for a contractor to operate concession stands on the north side for the north end recreation activities. There was one bidder. It went out for bid. It was advertised in the newspaper. There was one bidder. That bidder was contracted. They pay us to provide a service for concessions to the recreation patrons.
Right, and what we understand that they paid us, however, when we look at the value that was given, we provided them with a building, we provided them with all maintenance, electricity, and utilities for the building. They didn't pay any of that, did they?
As we were doing for the Booster Club prior to.
Ice
But-
machines. And
But that's not the point. The point is that we gave them a full operational facility and included all of the costs that we absorbed. Their cost was to pay us $50 plus buy the food and sell whatever they had to sell out of there.
And
Now-
provide a service.
Right. Look, I understand the service discussion. However, the Booster Club, you know, when they were there, we didn't see a nickel out of it. So I got to say, yeah, we got $50 out of it a month, which was an improvement. However, the Booster Club provided a service. They bought trophies. They bought all types of things, which I don't know that this contractor did.
No, has not.
So, you know, I'm going to let Mr. Duke continue with it. So there is some question about the value that we received out of it. And I understand we got rid of a headache.
It went out for public bid, Mr. Rizzo.
I'm not arguing.
Anybody else could have bid on it.
I'm not arguing with you at all. However, we have a responsibility that we can accept or reject the bid. If we don't feel that it's a value to the government and an equal value of what we're giving, then we don't have to accept the bid. Now,
Correct.
there's some other issues in here that Mr. Duke will address, but when we are representing and putting up property, just because we get a bid, like if we wanted to lease this building, and someone came in and gave us $10, but we're going to pay all the utilities and we're going to pay all the expenses and the insurance, that's not an equal value. And we go back to the Cabela case. Do we actually get the value that is required under the law, or are we actually making a donation? We've been through this through the courts with the port. We've been through this with other issues. So that's the reason we raised this issue. And while I understand that operating Booster Club, recreational concession stands is a small tab as far as the responsibility of the government, and it is a headache, we still got to look at it whether we're getting the value for what we're giving up. And that's, I guess, the purpose of looking at this. And I'll let Mr. Duke continue with his comments.
It's as I've stated before, the Cabela Act is very clear, and we have to be very careful with not complying with it, or we'll find ourselves in court. You know, if the legislative auditors come out here and they do a very thorough, because I've been with them, examination on can we prove and our compliance with the Cabela Act, can we prove it with documentation? If we can't, then we have a problem. Okay. Observation number 3, Bell Chase, East Bank, and Buras Recreation, job locations and duties. Recommendations: ensure the East Bank weekly job reports have a control in place for a signature and date. Management stated, I will follow up on this and make sure that these controls are in place. Point a la Hash Volunteer Fire Department. The budget, we have budgeted, I believe, $25,000 in the budget for the Davant Summer Recreation Program. My recommendation was ensure that an agreement is in place, a CEA is in place, or some other agreement that before any funds in the 2020 budget is used. The response, management response is the agreement has been sent to the fire department for signature. We are waiting for it to be returned. And I believe I have asked the Director of Public Service, as soon as they get a copy of that, to forward that to me.
Well, at this time of the year, it seems that there's no need for this program to proceed. I mean, the summer's over.
Right.
If they signed it now, what good would it be?
I agree with you on that.
So the $25,000 should stay in the budget and be utilized for probably balancing the budget.
That concludes my,
Do you know what the holdup is on signing it?
I don't know. We'd have to ask Mr. Epley that.
Insurance is a problem. All the CEAs we have require an insurance clause. We sent it to the Point Hatch Volunteer Fire Department requiring that they have general liability insurance. They have not provided general liability insurance. Therefore, it hasn't been signed and no funds have been dispersed.
And while we're on that subject of requiring insurance for all CEAs, I had someone approach me about baling hay, and I know we had someone bale hay here. Do they have a CEA with us, and did they provide insurance as well? Because the other individual was questioning me on that. He wanted to bale hay at the Medal of Honor Park or Barrier Road, and so I don't know what the situation is here. Do you?
I don't know anything about baling hay. I mean, I've seen it happening, but I don't know who's doing it or if there is agreement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, would you, you're who's over buildings?
Todd?
So Todd, you would have to look into that to find out if there's a CEA for baling the hay here, so we can tell the guy who wants to bale the hay at the Medal of Honor Park what the deal is. I think it's a good idea to bale hay. Don't get me wrong, it takes a burden off of the parish workforce for having to cut the grass, as long as they move the bales and not let them grow up in the weeds to make them a hazard for cutting the grass in the future.
And if whoever wants to bale hay at the Medal of Honor Park, if you want to have them get in touch with me, I'll see if we can work something out with them.
Mr. Plaisance, he said he's called here before. He actually had my phone number and said he talked to me a couple of years ago, and I made the comment to him that he had to have $1 million worth of insurance. Now, I don't personally remember the call, but he asked me, well, does this guy have it? So, I mean, that's where we're at. I'm just trying to answer the questions.
I don't mean to change the subject, but when we have these meetings and we have parish administration sitting, because of COVID, sitting on that side, is there any way that we can get microphones instead of directors having to get up persistently?
I don't know, true, Ms. Newberry. I would have to find out. I mean, as far as I know, the microphones that we have here in place are basically the ones that we have.
Can you find out? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Duke, want to move on?
Okay, that concludes my presentation on the Recreation Department internal audit.
Any more questions concerning the Recreation Department audit? If none, we can move on.
Audits in progress. A, status of the Community Action Internal Audit.
Okay, I'm working closely with Ms. Hughes, and with this audit, I do have a draft pretty much prepared. I'm working on this draft. I foresee this draft, or at least a draft report, coming out in the month of November, and the final report coming out in December of 2020.
I have a question, and I apologize. I want to go back to the audit for the recreation.
Okay.
And it's a statement that Mr. Duke has put in here on page 15. And it says the auditor noted that the bid process did not go through the purchasing department. And the purchasing department says, I have never heard of this vendor talking about the concessions. I have no purchase orders for them, and they don't even seem to be a vendor. So I guess my question is, do we have to go through the purchasing department? I guess is my question when we put out a bid. I mean, can somebody clarify that?
I would think that it would go through the purchasing in some form or fashion, especially since she handles all bids.
Okay.
This went out for public bid. It's not something that we're purchasing. They're paying us. We're not purchasing anything from them. That's why they're not listed as a vendor.
So, so there is a difference then, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Not everything has to go through purchasing, only when we purchase something. Is that correct? Is that what you just said?
That would be my understanding.
Well, then it goes back to the ordinance, and it should have came to us as a professional service.
Yes.
So-
It's my understanding that all bids go through purchasing.
Fuel bids.
Yeah, all bids. At least that's what Ms. Sandiford told me.
Buying fuel, so like the grass cutting when he paid Romelli the one-time cut, it didn't go out, right?
Did it go through purchase?
I don't know.
'Cause they're not buying nothing, right? We just hired them to cut grass.
I don't know. That falls under operations.
But you see the confusion that exists when, we're not included.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. We have to get together and change the culture here, especially for the Oversight Committee and the administration.
I think this needs to be clarified, especially by the next meeting.
Well,
Yeah,
We got to figure out who we need to get in touch with to clarify the differences in the bids.
I'm gonna check with purchasing on it, and I'll get back to y'all.
Well, obviously it didn't go through purchasing because.
Right, it didn't go through, but I'd like to know if it should have gone through purchasing. If all bids should go through purchasing, and that's the way I understand. Because she checks it. She checks to make sure that, we're in compliance with the bid process, especially the Louisiana bid process.
I'd like to see this cleared up so we don't have to come back to this again.
Yes.
That concludes your questions, Ms. Newberry? Thank you. Okay. You concluded your status on the YMCA audit that's in progress?
The community action final report should come out in December. The YMCA is sent out a draft report on that yesterday. Still working on it. Still waiting to see if I get any more replies from the YMCA or management. Management still has to give me their responses. They have until October 21st to respond to it. And as soon as I get those responses, the final report of the YMCA will be distributed.
Can I ask a question about that?
Not at this point. I have to wait for the final report to come out.
But it might not be about the report itself.
Well, yeah, it's about
If it's not about the report, we can we can answer it, I guess, or attempt to answer it.
Yeah, it's not out.
I'll wait.
Okay.
Any further comments or questions on those items? If not, we'll move to item 4.
Update and discussion on compensatory time.
Okay. All right. I was in some conversations with Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Taylor and I had a meeting on comp time, and I spoke with her recently about the status of comp time, and she stated the following to me. Good afternoon, Mr. Duke. Sorry for the delay, as we have been quite busy with hurricanes and preparing budget hearings. I've met with the directors and have been informed that none of their departments are currently practicing comp time. As you and I discussed in our meeting, administration has not encouraged and does not plan to encourage any employees using comp time. After discussing this with the parish president and administration, we feel it is better to not implement a comp time agreement at this time.
So, Ms. Taylor, would you like to elaborate on this for us?
As Mr. Duke stated, we met and discussed it, and I went back and met with directors, spoke with the parish president, spoke with finance, thoroughly did some research on it, and at this time, we actually do not have anyone that we know of in any of our departments practicing comp time. And like I told Mr. Duke, we are not encouraging practicing comp time. And after discussing it with the parish president and the other directors, we came to the conclusion with the financial state that we're in right now, we do not want to take up practicing comp time at this time.
In your discussion, did you find that paying overtime was more beneficial than having comp time?
Well, we've been trying to streamline that also, as far as overtime. We do have some overtime, and I've been trying to have an oversight over it, and the directors have been working with me, with their departments, trying to streamline the overtime. I would say either way, we're trying to control the overtime. The comp time thing, I think would just be a bit much right now.
And the reason that, we got into discussion, because we were, at least I was, under the impression that we were having people, for instance, you might not call it comp time, but if you worked over a couple of hours one day, you take off the next day a couple of hours, which in my mind means comp time. Now, is that practice occurring?
And we refer to that as flex time, as long as it's taken within that week that it happens. Yes, we do. If we have an employee who stays an hour or two over during that week, we allow that employee to take off an hour or two early within that week. And, we just call it flex time.
I see. And so,
And the employee is under, they're told that it's not comp time. We're not, if it's a situation where we're not going to pay overtime at that time, we offer them the flex time to take off earlier in that week.
let me ask you this. I know some departments use time clocks, which may seem outdated when we're talking about palming in, thumb out, irises, and all of those timekeeping operations. Has the administration looked at the possibility of implementing some accounting of time in a more modern world, such as palm in, thumb in?
We had discussed it one time before, then COVID happened, where, like you say, with the thumb and the palm print and all of that. We haven't discussed it lately, and I understand with technology and thing, it's more accurate and thing, and we can look into it again, but we have discussed it.
Like, for instance, the finance department, everyone over there punches a time clock.
Yes.
But in other departments, like, for instance, permitting, engineering, they don't punch time clocks, or do they?
They're supposed to be, everyone is supposed to be punching in on a time clock.
They're punching time clocks over there? So any departments that are not?
Not that I know of. Everyone is supposed to be using a time clock.
Okay.
Do we have any policies in place with time, whether it's time clocks or flex time?
We have, in the past,
There was an audit done earlier this year.
Well, the civil service rules are normal work hours are 8 to 4:30. So that's what the civil service rules
for some departments.
state. Well, we are under the civil service system for the entire parish, correct?
But some departments come, like Director Eppley, Buildings Department come in at a different time. Prom comes in from, I think, 7:30 to 3:30. It depends on the department.
Right, that's what the actual implementation of the workforce is, but that's not what the civil service rules say.
Okay.
Unless there's some language in there that allows that to give you the ability to do the flex time that you referred to. So to answer your question, I think that the civil service rule says that. Now, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, would it benefit us if we, I know during COVID, this might be an opportunity for us to sit down with legal, to sit down with civil service and directors, and maybe Mr. Lapine, and have some meetings and talk about flex time, comp time. I think these are meetings that should happen.
Sure.
So we don't, and this is why we're here. We want to be able to smooth things out with the government and work with y'all so we can have these policies in place so this doesn't come up again.
Sure.
Because I know Mr. Roussel has been in this for a very long time, and I feel like he repeats himself over and over, and we don't want to,
You don't want to hear me, huh? I understand, but I'm tired of saying it.
But my problem, the solution is we need to find a solution.
Right.
We need to find a solution to solve these problems. And this is a problem that we need to put a handle on.
Right.
So I'm just asking if y'all can talk about this and come up with some meetings to find a solution and to
Sure.
find a policy that puts in place that's comfortable for the board, comfortable for the administration and the departments. So that's my opinion.
And, the comp time issue is a serious issue that if you're accumulating, or employees think they're accumulating it, I can remember in the history of the parish where we've had a major issue where hundreds of thousands of dollars was being claimed by employees for comp time. You remember that?
Yes.
So we don't want to get into that trick bag and
Right.
have legal challenges and all of those things from employees that say they are owed hundreds of thousands of dollars as the group, not individuals, of comp time.
Right.
So, anyway, any other comments on this item? Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anything else to come before us today?
I'd just like to thank Ms. Taylor and Mr. Epley for the help they gave us Saturday for the cleanup there at the fort. It was very successful. And I'll thank y'all again at the council meeting too, but thank you.
Good. Okay, I'd like to move to item number 5.
Approval of the minutes from the August 13th, 2020 meeting.
Have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Mr. Konovich. Second by Ms. Newberry. Any comments or discussion on the approval of the minutes from the August 13th, 2020 meeting? Hearing none, machine is open. And the minutes are approved 3-0 unanimously.
Adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Konovich,
Second.
second by Ms. Newberry. Machine is open. And the meeting is adjourned at 9:48. Thank you all for attending.